It's my pleasure today to discuss with you some of the work that I've been doing with collaborators and in my lab on donor positive emotional experience as part of the Donor Research Network Week of Talks 2021. So to begin, setting a broad scene, a lot of research has gone into trying to explain the decision to donate. In many models, this involves identifying the forces that might drive someone to make the decision to donate and the restraining forces that might push them away from that same decision. And classically, practical matters such as convenience, knowledge, time have been identified, as well as more psychological factors such as personal values, perceived need of donated blood, and so on. Now, in these classic decision-making models, what is often missing is an appreciation of donor emotion. And there are several features of donating blood that really make it a prime candidate for a context where emotions matter. On the negative side of things, the simple fact that donating blood involves a needle insertion, that it can lead to adverse events, arises levels of fear and anxiety in donors. On the positive side, this may be self-evident, but the quintessential pro-social nature of donating blood, that is, giving part of yourself to another person at no direct benefit to the self, provides a positive sense of contribution, and in so doing, the experience of positive emotion. Now, what I and colleagues have proposed is that it's necessary to appreciate not only which emotions donors experience, but also when they arise. We propose an appreciation of the time course of emotion in donation. That involves laying out the fact that donors can experience emotion in an anticipatory fashion, that is, thinking ahead to a potential or a next donation. Donor's current emotion, that is the emotion that is experienced in center while donating. And also reflective emotion, which is elicited thinking back upon a previous donation. Now, classically, of course, time moves forward, and so it's clear that anticipatory emotion may impact current emotion, which may impact reflective emotion. But what we also propose is that as a donor moves from one donation to their next, the reflective emotion that they experience may, in fact, impact the anticipatory emotion for the next donation. So what I'd like to do today is present several studies that focus in on each of these three stages of the time course, looking at how the blend of positive and emotional states impacts donors' intention to donate, and in some studies, actual donation. Across these studies, positive and negative emotions have been operationalized in different ways, and I'll highlight the importance of that as relevant. So first, let's look to reflective emotion, or emotion recalled upon thinking about a prior donation. In this study, we recruited 124 prior donors who self-reported having donated blood in the past via an online sampling platform. We asked them to report, when thinking about your most recent blood donation experience, to what extent would you say you experienced one of several emotions? And we scored those emotions into three factors. The first was reflective positive emotion. This included happiness and pride. And then we also measured fear, anxiety, and sadness and regret, which held together respectively. First, what I'd like to show you are the overall mean levels of reflective emotion. In this sample of donors, you can see that levels of reflective positive emotion were moderate, whereas levels of reflective fear, anxiety, and sadness and regret were notably lower. In this study, we also asked donors their intention to donate again in the future. And when we use simultaneous regression to model how the reflective emotions impacted donation, what you can see here is that reflective positive emotion positively predicted intentions to donate in the future. Reflective fear and anxiety negatively predicted intentions to donate in the future, and reflective sadness and regret had a non-significant relationship with future intention. What this highlights is that we need to appreciate that both donors' positive and negative states can influence future intentions and that they don't do so in the same way. So turning now to donors' current emotion, I will present data from a project funded by the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood and the Australian Research Council. This study was led by Anne van Dongen and recently published in Annals of Behavioral Medicine. Today, I'd like to present the data from 414 first-time whole blood donors who we recruited in Donor Center, and we asked them to complete self-report scales on a tablet we provided them at 4 key stages of the donation process: in the waiting area, in the chair prior to needle insertion, in the chair while blood was being drawn, and in the refreshment area. And at each of those stages, we asked them to report both qualitatively and quantitatively on their current emotional experience. Turning first to the qualitative data, we asked our donors, if you had to use one single word to describe your current emotional experience, what would that be? You can see here in the waiting area, the predominant word provided by our participants was happy, followed by nervous, calm, relaxed, and excited. So predominantly positive. We find the same pattern in the chair prior to needle insertion, except for the fact that nervousness is the most commonly produced word at this stage. Now, once we get to in the chair during the blood draw and in the refreshment area, the 5 most common words at each of these stages were all positive. Turning now to the quantitative data, we asked our donors to report on 20 emotions drawn from the modified differential emotion scale. On the positive side, these included amusement, awe, gratitude, hope, inspiration, interest, joy, love, pride, and serenity. On the negative side, these included anger, shame, contempt, disgust, embarrassment, guilt, hate, sadness, fear, and stress. Here I'm going to show you the average levels of these 20 emotions reported by our donors. First, the positive emotions. And what you can see here is that across the 4 time points, our donors reported moderate levels of these positive states. There was variability in the levels according to some of the emotions, so I won't be focusing on that in particular today. Turning to the negative emotions, you can see here that the majority of them were reported at very, very low levels, and the negative emotions that did arise were of relative higher intensity in the waiting area and in the chair prior to needle insertion. Now, with this data, what we decided to do was implement a statistical approach of group-based multi-trajectory modeling. And across 3 stages, what we did was first classify donors according to trajectory patterns over time of several emotions. So this approach allowed us to include not only the time dimension, but also several emotions. Secondly, we modeled the association between those different emotion trajectories and the return to donate within 6 months, to see if there were particular patterns of emotional experience that were associated with higher or lower likelihood of returning. Now, in terms of that last question, what we did was we compared those trajectory return estimates associated with each trajectory with a control group of donors, that is, donors of the same status from the same centers, but who were not invited to participate. Now, constraints of this modeling approach meant that we couldn't carry forward all 20 emotions. And due to a variety of theoretical and statistical reasons, we selected 2 positive emotions, joy and calm, and 1 negative emotion, stress, to carry forward into the modeling. When we applied this modeling, 5 classes of donors were identified, and the trajectories of each of the 3 emotions are depicted here, along with the percentage of donors who were classified as following each of these trajectories. I'll note here that the trajectories for emotions in group 1 were linear, whereas the trajectories for all of the other emotions in all of the other groups were quadratic in nature. I'll also note here that due to high skew in the stress variable, we coded it as a likelihood of reporting any stress at all. Now, what I've also present here are the return rates associated with each of these trajectory classes. And you can see here that there is some variability. Now, when we compare these estimated return rates against the return rates of our control group of donors who did not participate, which was 43%, two groups were statistically significantly different from that control group as determined by falling outside the 95% confidence interval. These were groups 2 and 3. What you can see here is that for donors who followed a general trajectory of high and increasing levels of joy and calm and low and decreasing level of stress, they were more likely to return to donate than the control group of donors. And this is in contrast to a group of donors who had low and increasing levels of joy and calm and a high probability of stress, especially in the waiting area and prior to needle insertion, that decreased over time. This overall trajectory of joy, calm, and stress was associated with a lower estimated return to donate relative to the control group. What this data highlight is the need to appreciate not only the time course of emotional experience, but also both positive and negative states, because in conjunction is the only way that we can identify these unique trajectories. Now, finally, I'd like to present to you a set of studies looking at anticipated emotion. These studies recruited non-donors, a mixed sample of donors and non-donors, and finally, a sample of donors. Across these studies, we also operationalized anticipated positive and negative states in different ways, but what you'll see is an overall similar pattern, despite that variability. What I'd first like to present is a set of studies led by an honors student in my lab on CHU. For each study, we recruited approximately 275 self-reported non-donors who were currently eligible to donate. Now, these studies included several experimental manipulations that are not of primary focus to today's presentation. Now, we asked our non-donor sample to consider the positive emotions they might experience if they were to donate blood in the future, anxiety if they were to donate blood in the future, and guilt if they were not to donate blood in the future. Now, overall across studies, what you can see here is that levels of anticipated positive emotion, if these non-donors were imagining that they would donate in the future, were again fairly moderate. In this sample of non-donors, levels of anticipated anxiety at potentially donating blood were also moderate, and anticipated guilt was lower but certainly present. Now, in this study, we also asked these non-donors their intention to donate blood in the future. And when we conduct a simultaneous regression predicting intention to donate blood in the future by anticipated emotional states while controlling for the impact of the experimental manipulations, what you can see here is a consistent set of findings across studies. That is, that anticipated positive emotion positively predicted donation intention. Anticipated guilt at not having donated blood also positively predicted donation intention, and anticipated anxiety at a potential future donation negatively predicted intention. So here we start to see a deviation between nuances of negative states. That is, sometimes negative emotions push donors towards donating, and sometimes they push them away from donating. Next, I'd like to turn to the sample of donors and non-donors. This was work conducted in collaboration with Chris France, Janice France, Luna Himawan, and an honor student in my lab, Anthony Jaitani. In this study, as with the study I just presented, there were several experimental manipulations that I won't focus on today. But across two studies, we recruited nearly 5,000 participants each. Again, these were mixed donors and non-donors. And we asked them to report on anticipated warm glow if they were to donate in the future, These items include feeling a warm glow inside, feeling emotionally positive about myself, and feeling good about myself. We also asked them to report on anticipated regret if they did not donate in the future. These items include feeling guilty or ashamed, feeling bad about myself, and feeling as if I would regret it. So again, here I've presented the data across the various conditions across each of the studies, but what you can see is amongst this mixed sample, notably high levels of anticipated warm glow, and also notable levels of anticipated regret. Now, the fact that we included donors and non-donors allowed us to explore whether levels of anticipated warm glow and regret varied according to donation status, and indeed it did. We observed higher anticipated warm glow and anticipated regret amongst our donors relative to our non-donors. As with prior studies, we also asked participants to report on their intention to donate blood. And when we modeled the impact of anticipated warm glow and anticipated regret on donation intention while controlling for the various experimental manipulations, we see a consistent pattern whereby anticipated warm glow positively predicted donation intention. We see a consistent pattern whereby anticipated warm glow positively predicted donation intention, and anticipated regret also positively predicted donation intention. This is consistent with the prior study where we measured anticipated guilt. Now, the final study I'd like to present today is a sample of donors. This work was carried out in collaboration with Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, where we recruited 812 whole blood donors. They completed a survey in the refreshment area of the donor center. And during that survey, they were asked, when you think about your next potential donation, to what extent do you anticipate feeling a number of emotions? These included a variety of positive emotions, including pride, accomplishment, fulfillment, achievement, joy, and happiness; fear, including fear, panic, anxiety, and worry; sadness and sorrow; and regret and disappointment. Now, as with the prior studies, what I've plotted here are overall levels of these 4 types of emotion. What you can see is that these donors anticipated moderate levels of positive emotion in the future and very low levels of fear, anxiety, sadness, and regret. And indeed, when we look at the number of donors who reported not at all on our 7-point scale, what you can see here is the vast majority reported this very low level amongst our negative emotions. Now, for the next analysis, we decided to carry forward fear and anxiety given the small but relatively higher level of variance for that emotion. Now, because we recruited donors, we were able to track their return to donate in the ensuing 6 months. We were curious about how the anticipated emotions that we measured would impact that return, especially via intention to donate, which we did also measure in the refreshment area. Consistent with a large body of research, intention to donate did positively predict return to donate in 6 months. When we add our measures of anticipated positive emotion and anticipated fear and anxiety, what you can see here is that anticipated positive emotion positively predicted intention, which of course in turn positively predicted return. And when we analyze that indirect effect from anticipated positive emotion to return via intention, that indirect effect was non-zero. Likewise, turning to anticipated fear and anxiety, we observed a negative relationship with intention. Likewise, the indirect effect from anticipated fear and anxiety on return via intention was non-zero and negative. So overall, to the extent that our donors experienced anticipated positive emotion and did not experience anticipated fear and anxiety, intention to donate in the future and thus return to donate in the future was higher. So to recap this set of studies of anticipated emotion, it highlights not only the need to focus on both positive and negative emotions, but also on potential variety amongst them. Going back to the broader question of how positive and negative states influence donors' intention and future behavior, it's clear that emotional states do matter. That with an increased appreciation of the variety and the timing of emotional states, we can achieve a better understanding of the overall process by which donors come to donate the first time and also donate repeatedly over time. The next steps in this line of research really take three forms. So the first is to focus in on which emotions. This research has adopted a variety of focus on different positive and different negative states. And further work is needed to systematically examine which emotions matter in this space. Another important thing to sort out is also when. So I've presented each of these studies, which have looked at reflective, current, and anticipated emotions, each in turn. But the full model of the time course of emotion and donation really paints a causal picture where anticipated emotions impact current emotions, which may impact reflective emotions, and on in a cyclical manner. Work that integrates across timeframes of emotional experience has yet to be done. The third question is for whom? This has to do with whether type of donation, that is whole blood or plasma, or indeed non-blood, may matter in terms of the types of emotional experience and also the relationship with future intention. We can also look at differences perhaps in career stage. There may be peaked positive emotional experience associated with different stages of a donor career. This remains to be examined. So with that, I would like to acknowledge my collaborators across these studies and also financial support from the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, as well as the Australian Research Council.